Minister, and then the three panelists from business community and labor also spoke to issues, but instead of like summarizing their inputs, what we're gonna do is to speak to the outcome of the entire commission. After the presentation by the four panelists, the floor was open for contributions by members of the commission. And could I have the next slide, which covers the... Now, no, not this slide. Could we move on to the other slide? Yeah, so this is the feedback from the commission. As we know that the commission was focusing on interventions that are about job creation. The feedback from the commission were the following: that there's a need to focus on critical segment of youth and women for local procurement on things like on things like linen, uniforms. It could be school uniforms, it could be nurses' uniforms, and so on and so forth. The idea is basically to make sure that we treat this as an element through which you can procure the services of businesses which are youth and women owned. There is a proposal of creating a 24-hour service delivery model in South Africa to extend the working day, not necessarily by ensuring that people work longer hours, but ensuring that the economy itself begin to move to operating over 24 hours. Government, if possible, is requested to look at being able to extend services that could be extended after the normal working hours of 4:30 and 5, all the way maybe to the night. This could then stimulate other activities by the private sector and the community in general to extend the day to 24 hours in the country. Then there's the recommendation that we need to prioritize and leverage quick wins, because in the entire agreement or the entire agreements, there are things that could be done as soon as next week and the things that could be done a year later. The quick wins that can be done now, they must be prioritized and leveraged. There is a recommendation that the avocados are actually used as an example, but there's a recommendation that communities have to be partnered with both government and business so that they can grow large value crops both for the local and export market. There is also a recommendation there is an acknowledgement that the agreement did well in covering the waste economy and the waste economy initiatives. Related to that was the request in particular relating to informal traders, that the municipalities must create an enabling environment for informal traders and waste pickers and stop harassing them, because there has to be a recognition that this is actually an economic activity that contributes to lowering levels of unemployment in the country. Then there's a proposal that says we need to look at the role of the Department of Labor and CCMA to make them more effective in terms of like supporting the agreements that have been reached here. There has to be a greater focus on defining jobs that can do with entry-level experience to promote youth employment. It's part of what the community overall convener was saying yesterday, that the requirement for experience, more especially even in employment opportunities that could do with somebody without experience, there has to be an encouragement of ensuring that we reduce the entry-level requirement of experience wherever is possible. And actually also support that with advertising jobs and indicating both the TVET college graduate requirement as well as no need for experience. There's a need to address structural changes to allow access to value chains. There are a lot of examples that we make on the structural economic changes that will allow access to value chains. But the point is that generally, we still remain a country that is very extractive and then trade on extractive products. Can we move on? Is this the... Okay. There's need to consider multi-use models for existing public sector infrastructure, high schools, and skills development center. It's part of this extension also of the working day, where instead of basically, if the community doesn't have resources, there's a recommendation that you could be using facilities. You can use a school as a primary school during the day and a high school during the night as an example. You could also use like a school for skills development interventions when it's not utilized for the normal schooling activities. Reduce bureaucracy and provincialism. There has to be a deliberate focus on protecting existing jobs. There has to be a focus on local production in terms of furniture, cars, gas, heavy machinery components. The furniture thing was already spoken to by President, and Minister Davis also brought focus to it that, for instance, there is a real demand for furniture, and there is a scope for us as a nation to produce furniture here in the country. The gas, the cars, and heavy machinery, there's also examples which are contained in the detailed report. Create an Opel model for platinum. The view that South Africa is one of the biggest platinum producing countries, and we've seen other players like OPEC utilizing their ability as oil producing countries to determine like the future and how the economic activity around oil. So the proposal is that we must look at doing the same for our resource like platinum. Review mandate of the South African Reserve Bank to include industrialization and employment and the funding for DFIs, or development finance institutions. There's a need to decentralize the industries to move outside of the big cities. The point is that industries cannot just be focused in the major cities, whereas like the economic activities are supposed to be happening all over the country. So there should be a deliberate effort and programs to ensure there's a decentralization of industries. Then finally, safeguard well-being of cities by creating a moratorium on evictions by banks and municipalities. Is safeguard the well-being of citizens. Now, this report is just extracting some of the contributions over a 90 minutes period, and we are trying to summarize it in 10 minutes. Further details are available and they are given to NEDLEC for processing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now call upon the rapporteur for Commission 2. And can I also ask the rapporteur for Commission 3 to come up?
Thank you, Minister. I'm waiting for our slide. Thank you. So this slide gives an overview of the interventions and the agreements that were discussed in this session. This was about enablers for job creation. So I'm not going to go into each one of the aspects of the slide. I think it's pretty self-explanatory and pretty straightforward. Suffice it to say that the discussion that came up really supported the interventions and the agreements that were reached. We did try, Chair, to stick to the fact that we're not generating new agreements, even though the temptation was quite great to generate new agreements, but I think we did somewhat manage to come up with suggestions that perhaps add more flesh or flesh out the agreements and the interventions that are already on the table. There are a couple of points perhaps that we would like to add which were not quite reflected in the agreements. And these are generic, perhaps cross-cutting enablers as well. May I have the next slide, please? There's a critical issue of tracking, monitoring, and evaluation. And the discussion felt that we would be able to strengthen the agreements and the interventions, but also will be able to ensure some level of sustainability on the agreements reached, as well as be able to establish the return on investment. And it's important to flag here that the focus should not only be on those agreements that can be measured through numbers, but also to begin to understand how best to measure social impact. The next point about coordination of efforts at all levels, this came out quite strongly. And here we recognize coordination at all levels, and we also recognize that while NEDLAC is already providing a good platform for coordination, perhaps at a level where we really need to go into the nuances of the agreements and the interventions, we need to be thinking about different kinds of platforms where basically we are not going to go and negotiate positions, but we will be able to focus quite practically on the targets that have been set. And I think this is a crucial point because often we tend to, or social partners tend to second guess what each other is saying. And the idea is that we have to work in rhythm so that we understand the same things the same way. The issue of demand-led came strongly, even though it was put on the table in terms of the examples that were put forward. And we cannot emphasize enough, Madam Chair, the notion of demand-led, but in particular, the need to understand the nexus between demand and supply. And I think flowing from this issue of demand-led, the fourth industrial revolution, the innovation around that, but also the speed at which technological change is happening is something that was fleshed out. But also, this brings out the need for structured and purposeful partnerships, as well as the fact that within TVET colleges, we would really like to see work readiness training forming an integral part of delivery in the TVET colleges. And I think the one speaker after another made reference to learnerships. But I think underlying that is the realization that we need to be quite bold and not scared to rethink our approaches and models to skills development and to youth employability. So the idea perhaps of rethinking how we select young people and how we match them to fields of study where they are likely to succeed is something that we need to consider. And I must hasten here to add that this is not selection to exclude, but rather to ensure that we reduce wastage in the system and we enhance the throughput rates in the TVET colleges. The quality of workplace-based learning was also put quite strongly on the table, particularly in facilitating the transition of youth into the world of work. The last point in closing, Chair, is this whole agreement, that the realization that the agreement is meant to benefit young people. And therefore, young people should be the ones really that should be seen to be championing and promoting the agreement, and the need to cascade that into other levels of youth structures. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rapporteur for Commission 3. Nomzana was.
Thank you, Program Director. My name is Jan Mahlangu. I'm from Organized Labour. Chair, our panel focused on interventions on enhancing efficiencies. And there were key 5 themes, but I will not go through them to save time because they were mainly covered in the main proposals arising from the panel. But the important thing that the panel looked at was one, to accept that there is a framework agreement which was agreed to, and we are not opening up new discussions on the framework agreement, but to look at new proposals in terms of how are we going to implement that. If we may move to the next slide, please. On key discussions points and proposal, the panel proposed the following. That one, on National Youth Service, there was a proposal that says the aim of this program is to train more than 50,000 young people over the next 5 years in artisan training, and two, that to ensure that public service employ more youth to allow them to get and to gain required skill, and thirdly, to train, that training should focus on responding to the fourth industrial revolution. The second proposal was Vukupile Contractor Learnership Program. The main proposal there was a program which is to benefit 500 beneficiaries over the next 5 years. The aim of this is to upskill and develop contractor companies which will make sure that there are in labor-intensive projects. The third proposal was on youth environmental service, which basically the proposal for this program is to utilize unemployed young people to participate in activities for providing environmental services that will benefit communities they live in. The fourth proposal was on recruitment guidelines around the EPWP. Social partners have agreed in the panel to collaborate in the implementation of EPWP in order to make sure that it boosts support for fair and transparent processes in the recruitment of EPWP participants. For example, we're told that there are gatekeepers. If one leader is responsible in one community, we'll make sure that those who are employed are only the ones which are linked to a particular leader. So this is to make sure that every member of that community is allowed to be employed if it's so applied. The fifth proposal was on working on water program. On this one, basically, the panel agreed that this program presents a notable job creation potential through the labor-intensive control of invasive species. The next one was on social audits. The DPW, together with community constituency, aims to conduct social audits of youth between the ages of 18 and 24 who have not been admitted to institutions of higher learning, to make sure that they are trained and they get employed. The seventh proposal was EPWP expanded work programs. Basically, business on this one was to be involved to make sure that there are new initiatives and new ways of rolling out programs which will make sure that all social partners are participating. Thank you very much. The other points for discussions were the following. That here, the aim is to follow up on the commitment made in terms of the Paris Agreement of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and that one, a statutory body, a Presidential Climate Change Coordinating Commission, will be established under the presidency to coordinate and oversee the just transition and to create opportunities for job creation. And two, that the other aim of the PCCCC is to understand the impact of climate change by location in each communities. And three, that universities should start offering climate environmental studies as auxiliary models to be taken by all students. That we need to learn from other countries that have experienced natural disasters so that we can be proactive in handling our own challenges should that happen. The next point that we discussed and agreed was that youth should be upskilled and students with environmental studies so that they can assist on issues of global warming, climate change, and emergency services. The next point which was discussed and agreed to was new waste management strategies which will ensure all viable food is used appropriately to alleviate hunger and for food security in our country. The next one was on paper and plastic interventions which will ensure we increase recycling. And also that there should be commitment across all social partners to ensure the reduction of carbon intensity and greenhouse gas emissions. We further agreed on the following, that corruption should be declared. Can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. That corruption should be declared enemy number one because it's enemy number one. Two, that COGTA commits to establishing a joint task team which will investigate the challenges being experienced and propose measures to resolve the issues in consultation with business and other social partners. Two, that ASISA commits to providing technical assistance, mentorship, and development to ensure that the technical skills that are needed for infrastructure project implementation are in place, and therefore those young people can be absorbed in those new jobs to provide the required services. Also, the other point was that there's an urgent need to fill critical vacancies, which is part of the framework agreement and was raised by the President yesterday. And that all retired personnel should provide skills and skills transfer for local municipalities to make sure that where they are required, we have skills to implement these programs. And lastly, that we will have to remove bureaucratic red tapes and unresponsiveness within the communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If there are any issues that the members of the various commissions feel that they were left out, I would appeal that you just write them on the paper, and then towards the end, you will submit it to the Executive Director of NEDLEC. And also, I want to remind all members to sign the attendance register as we did yesterday. We have the attendance register for today. Can we please give all the rapporteurs the round of applause? Thank you very much. Honorable President, ministers, deputy ministers, our social partners, ladies and gentlemen, allow me now to call upon the CEO of Proudly South Africa to do his job, and he knows what he's going to do. CEO.
Thank you, Program Director, Minister Oliphant, the Honorable President, His Excellency, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, leadership of the social partners represented here, ladies and gentlemen. The establishment of the Buy Local campaign was one of the outcomes of the Presidential Job Summit held 20 years ago, coincidentally in the same month. And as I stand here today at this Presidential Job Summit, it holds special significance for us as proudly South African. In the intervening years after the campaign came into being, we have been working hard to create awareness of the importance and also of the impact that increased levels of localization can have on the economy, the country, and of course, the retention of existing jobs and the creation of much-needed new jobs. But we have not been working in a vacuum. We have been working in the midst of global and local financial crises, recessions, and many other economic ups and downs. Now, with unemployment at unacceptable levels, and as you pointed out yesterday, Honorable President, it is time to give localization a massive push in support of reindustrialization. And as mentioned in your speech yesterday, Honorable President, as a country, we have to find creative ways and not in an arrogant way, like you mentioned, Mr. President, to start pushing the message to South Africans to ask them and to plead with them to put South Africa first and to choose local whenever making purchasing decisions, whether in our households, in the public sector, or even in the private sector. Manufacturing is one of the 4 priority sectors for special attention outlined in your stimulus package, Honorable President. Therefore, as proudly South African, we have actively solicited commitments from member companies to grow their levels of localization in order to bolster manufacturing and to resultantly contribute to the retention of existing jobs and the creation of much-needed new jobs. And we have done this with the support of strategic partners since we work with all social partners, and we have engaged the likes of the manufacturing circle as well as Business Leadership South Africa. And in that partnership, we've managed to acquire a certain number of commitments from companies who are already working on growing both their levels of local content in their production processes, as well as the percentage that is contained in their inputs and their buying, as well as the local procurement levels. This includes local procurement levels within stationery, furniture, and other consumables. And we're inviting more companies to join us in this journey by also identifying some items that are part of their procurement spend, be it raw materials or consumables that can be bought exclusively from local producers and or manufacturers. I would now, Honorable Chairperson, like to introduce a number of these companies who will each outline their respective commitments to localization and job creation. Firstly, let me ask the first company to come up, and they will talk to what they have put in place, and we will then have other companies follow them. It will not necessarily follow the sequence there. We've had some changes. Some companies had to leave due to time constraints. So those commitments from those companies that had to leave, I will communicate myself, Chair. So the first one that is available is Ms. Lucia Swartz, who is the Vice President for People for AB InBev.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Lucia Swartz. I'm the Vice President of People for AB InBev Africa. On behalf of South Africa Breweries, we are really proud to be part of this important summit, engaging in meaningful and much-needed discussions on job creation and unemployment. At South African Breweries, we firmly believe in the power of homegrown, and that is why we are here alongside our partner, Proudly South Africa, as well as other corporates who understand the importance of local sourcing. Our corporate strategy, together with our public interest commitments, is designed to ensure that we maintain or improve on our 90% of local procurement spend ratio. We are also focused on ensuring that we maintain a highly localized agricultural supply chain, especially for barley, hops, and maize. Mr. President, we have also challenged ourselves to create 10,000 jobs in South Africa by 2022. We will do this through our entrepreneurship platform, which includes the following: the SAB Foundation, which focuses on rural and disabled entrepreneurs; SAB Lerumo, which is dedicated to Black women entrepreneurs by providing focused training, coaching, and mentoring; SAB Thrive, which is a Black-owned equity fund to transform traditionally white-owned businesses to Black-owned in our existing supply chain; SAB Kickstart, that supports youth entrepreneurs; finally, the SAB Accelerator, that focuses on new and emerging suppliers in our supply chain to become more profitable and expand their businesses. In 2018, we recruited and trained 600 new South Africans through our Global Management Trainee Program, our Functional Trainee Program, apprenticeships, in-service training, learnerships, and scholarships. Mr. President, we are fully aligned with the goals and endeavors of the Job Summit. We firmly believe that we need to get South Africans working.
Madam Chairperson, the next company to present is Coca-Cola Beverages South Africa, represented by Ms. Motsidi Simukwena, who is the Head of Reputation and Regulatory Affairs.
Mr. President, honorable ministers, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. My name is Motsidi Simukwena. I work for Coca-Cola Beverages South Africa. We are essentially a 2-year-old company. We were formed in 2016 after the amalgamation of 6 companies. We are a strong 7,500 employees in our business, and we have currently 661 learners who joined our business in 2018. In terms of our local sourcing commitments, we are currently sourcing 95% of all our materials locally, and the aim is to maintain it or increase it where possible. While a major condition by the Competition Commission, we have committed 400 million towards agricultural funding to revitalize economic revitalization in rural economies. We have set aside a 27 million fund to basically remove hyacinth in all our dams and convert it into fertilizer. And with that one, we have created approximately 25 permanent jobs currently. We have set aside 3.9 billion in the next 3 years towards Black-owned businesses, in particular Black female-owned businesses. And we're calling on SMMEs to actually approach us so that we can have conversations with them and we can see how we can assist them. We currently have 153 LDPs, which are local distribution partners, and from that we've been able to create 2,601 jobs. The total turnover for each of these businesses is 500 million per annum. We have 503 owner-drivers in the business, and the plan is to increase them. And today we've created approximately 1,000 jobs from this program. In terms of youth development, we are committing to continue funding to the tune of 15 million per annum towards young people, in particular their tertiary education throughout all their studies. We have trained approximately 10,300 outlets in townships with regards to grow their business strategies. We have initiated what we call a business in a box, which is basically spaza shops in townships and rural areas. And our 2018 target is 213 young people will be receiving their boxes by the end of the year. The plan, again, is to increase this year on year by about 200 by 2020. We have created through our schools recycling program at least about 78 jobs, and this is basically a program that we're running with schools, but we've been able to create jobs outside of this program. We set aside through the Gucci Foundation about R1 million towards scholarships per annum. Lichtenburg, we have R2 million that we set aside for education again, and the 7.2 million per annum commitment will remain for as long as we remain in business. I thank you.
Honorable Program Director, the next commitment, which is in line with companies ramping up their local production levels or their local procurement levels, is going to come from Adcock Ingram. However, due to the delay that we encountered this morning, they had to attend to another engagement, and they've asked me to read out their commitment. And the commitment reads as follows. In addition to being a major employer in its pharmaceuticals manufacturing plants, Adcock Ingram's owner-driver initiative, launched in 2012, is an innovative program that gives employees an opportunity of owning their own business. The owner-driver initiative spans over 10 operational facilities with 117 vehicles and 35 owner-drivers, employing more than 217 drivers and assistants. And the plan is to expand this in order to make sure that we support the drive of creating jobs as addressed in this summit. Adcock Ingram South African manufacturing plants located in Gauteng, namely Clayville, Wadeville, and Aeroton, currently employ over 1,638 people. These are direct jobs created and sustained by the pharmaceutical manufacturing company. And the plan is to increase local content levels in a way that will influence the indirect jobs that are created by our procurement patterns. That is a commitment. The next presentation will come from a company called Lixil Africa Pty Ltd, represented by their National Technical Manager, Mr. Andrew Camprosen.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity. Lixil owns 3 factories in South Africa under the brands Cobra, Vol, and Libra. We have been around for over 70 years, manufacturing products for South Africans by South Africans. We are members of the Manufacturing Circle and recently have become members of Proudly South African. Lixil is one of a select few local manufacturers in the sanitary ware and brassware sector, including baths, mixers, taps, shower heads, toilets, and water-saving devices. Lixil employs just over 1,400 South Africans. Lixil welcomes designation of valves and actuators, and in turn is committed to growing local procurement in its supply chain. Thank you.
Program Director, the next commitment is going to come from an organization that represents a group of manufacturers, and they are here to make a collective commitment from members of an organization known as the Manufacturing Circle, and representing them is Ms. Ayanda Ngati.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The Manufacturing Circle is proud to be associated with this important gathering. We consider our role very key because we are aware of our top three multiplier sectors being in value addition, job creation, export and revenue earning, and therefore we consider our role here to be quite important. We, and together with our members, are collaborating with government and various manufacturing associations, PAMSA included, to assess opportunities in value chains and to identify opportunities to import replacement, export-led growth, as well as addressing current blockages in driving local procurement and production. Since our launch of the Map to a Million, which is essentially a map to 1 million jobs being created within a 10-year period since November 2017, we have committed to local procurement and job creation through investment in production capacity research and development, marketing and international best practice. A lot of detail has been shared with NEDLEC that has been contributed by some of our members, and I will list some of the members who have listed out all of their plans. Essentially, the work that they are planning to do over the next 5 years is in excess of a few billion rands. Companies like SABC, Impact, Coruscant, Maltotech, Nampak, Runet, as well as Aspen Pharmacare, as well as AMCA and Lixil Africa, who just addressed us, are directly represented in the manufacturing circle. This is fundamental to effectively implementing the increased aggregate to local demand and urgent demand-side intervention required to grow our economy and create jobs that our country desperately needs. We leave the summit highly energized, Mr. President, to put South Africa first, knowing that there is absolute power in agreement. Thank you.
The next commitment program director is from Tsukhasan. Unfortunately, they also had to leave, but I will read out their commitment, and it reads as follows. The group's combined spend on enterprise and supply development for the last financial year ending 31 March 2018 was 101 million rands. 21 million rands of this was spent on enterprise development beneficiaries and 79.4 million of which was spent on supply development beneficiaries, representing a total of 5.1% of net profit after tax. A total of 53 businesses in the alumni phase have expanded their operations as a result of the program, and each employs between 1 and 50 staff and reaches up to 30 people in the value chain. The program is currently in its 4th year, and this is part of a 5-year implementation program. There are plans afoot in support of the Presidential Job Summit to continue with the program post the 5-year phase, and the plan is that we multiply these jobs through ensuring that procurement opportunities are awarded to companies that are part of the enterprise and supply development programs. The next commitment comes from Aspen, and they're represented by the Senior Executive for Strategic Trade Development, Mr. Stavros Nikolai.
Thank you. Honourable President, Honourable Ministers and Deputy Ministers, members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, and colleagues. I stand here as a representative of Aspen Pharmacare today. Aspen is a South African multinational company and a world leader in anesthetics and injectable anticoagulants. Our commitment today is to ongoing investment into our economy, and we will be making an announcement at the Presidential Investment Conference later on this month of several billions of rands of further investment in both domestic and particularly export demand. President, I'm not going to elaborate too much on that investment because I'm going to keep the powder dry for the moment, but we'll come out guns blazing later on this month. However, colleagues, as part of this ongoing investment, Aspen is committing to the local procurement of goods and services in its South African operations, particularly through dedicated local procurement initiatives, which inter alia include the areas of building and construction of plants. And in fact, President, I can let you know with all of these constructions, they've been 100% fulfilled by black-owned South African companies. So that's this investment I'm talking about and previous ones that we've undertaken this year. We'll also focus on the procurement of local packaging material and componentry from SMEs, supply chain services and distribution from SMEs, local training, skills, scholarship and bursary services and facilitation, and ongoing enterprise development in SMEs and QSEs. All of these areas, colleagues, have a direct local multiplier effect into our economy. And as a last comment, I'd like to say that we are also members of the Manufacturing Circle and proudly South Africa, so Aspen is, and We live by the mantra, and hopefully a mantra that we can infuse to the rest of colleagues in this room. We live by the mantra that South Africa should be exporting products, not jobs. So support local manufacture. Thanks very much.
Program Director, next up is a representative of Nestlé South Africa, and this is Mr. Ravi Pillay, who is the Corporate Affairs Director.
Honorable President, good afternoon, dignitaries. Our task here today is maybe to do a commitment, but maybe to rephrase it a bit and call it a recommitment. In our 102nd year in South Africa, Nestlé is firmly committed. And it's very pleasing that the timing of this conference coincides with a decision that was taken on the 1st of August this year, where Johannesburg for Nestlé in the continent becomes the regional head office for Nestlé in the continent, running 23 countries from this lovely city. So that we see as a firm confidence booster for us as a country and for the region itself. Our capital expenditure program since 2017 is about 660 million rand, and the nature of the investment is focused on maintenance, capacity increases, and green technologies. Our investment areas in the country include the smaller towns of Buffalo City, Babeleji, Maluti Apofong, Escort, and Mossel Bay. Mr. President, competitiveness, as you know, is key in the global economy these days. As a guest of the Consumer Goods Council at the CGF Forum in Cape Town in 2016, when you were Deputy President, we also were exposed to 2.3 trillion euros of capital in one room. And as we saw from that experience, the expectation and commitment for South Africa to produce competitively was a guarantee of increased investment. The point that we've been discussing very actively recently is the point of investor retention to attract new jobs and to attract additional capacity. Nestlé, as a company, employs 5,400 people, and about 54,000 livelihoods depend on the organization, spanning 13 plants across the country in 5 provinces as well. In 2016, as a firm commitment to the region and to the continent, we invested in a 1.2 billion coffee expansion project in Escort. This came at a time when much needed optimism in the country was required, and we did it with the big expectation of pushing exports northward of the boundaries of South Africa beyond the Limpopo River. On the procurement side, we're pleased to say that with a 4% projected increase for 2018, we will be investing about 6.4 billion rand on local procurement. Of the 6.4 billion, around 900 million is dedicated to EME and QSE enterprises. 95% of all our products produced locally is actually made in all South African plants. 65% of our raw materials are sourced locally, and we work with about 200 farmers procuring milk and other raw materials required. Mr. President and colleagues, dignitaries in the room, notwithstanding the need for creating new jobs in the economy, the big drive now is about entrepreneurship and how do we create enabling instruments together with government programs to massify employment in communities. Just to share in my last 30 seconds that our program with the Department of Small Business, which was officially launched this year with Minister Zulu at the Proudly South African Summit, saw us distributing 39 vehicles to black entrepreneurs who previously either did not have a vehicle or actually had vehicles but not suitable for that type of work. And we're pleased to say that it's showing rebounding success. After 3 years, we expect to create 600 new entrepreneurs, each employing 3 additional staff in their operations. And that for us is the key to increase employment in the country. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
The next company that has given a commitment is Edcon, and I will read out their commitment as they have left. Edcon has prioritized the focus on increasing local content from 38% in 2015 to the current 53% in order to stimulate jobs and create truly South African products. Local sourcing is viewed at a local and regional perspective, and merchandise is sourced for private labels. The SA vendors contribute almost 80% of the local regional volume, balance 20% placed with regional vendors in Botswana, Swaziland, and Lesotho. This local sourcing is driven through direct investment in local manufacturing capacity, as is the case of Celrose and Edels, and is also enabled through the strengthening of other local manufacturers. Currently, Celrose and Edels employ 1,970 people, and the projection is that they will all collectively increase the number of jobs by 16% over the next 6 months due to this increased local sourcing. Edcon is also working with the Sustainable Cotton Cluster to revive the cotton sector and create sustainability from farmer to retailer. This initiative stimulates local sourcing and creates jobs in the farmers who grow cotton, weavers, dyers, retailers, and local manufacturers. The Edgar's Unite Orange Day campaign is an initiative that targets survivors of gender-based violence and boosts these women's economic participation by upskilling and providing employment and access to market, including through Edcon's own supply chain. Edcon has economically empowered over 122 survivors of gender violence through an accredited skills training program in sewing and fashion design, and commits to roll this program out nationally by 2021. The Edcon Design Innovation Challenge, targeted at final year and postgraduate South African fashion design students, are given an opportunity to further develop their fashion, design and entrepreneurial skills through the learning platforms, including full-time employment. The selection of the young designers for inclusion in Edgar stores is a validation of the goals of the program. The last commitment program director comes from a company called AMCA, and the MD had to go to mosque, so unfortunately he had to leave. But I will read out his commitment. His name is Mr. Nizam Kala. And his commitments reads as follows. AMCA Products has manufactured and sold health and beauty products over the last 60 years, and today we export 20 leading brands into 60 countries around the world. Our purpose is to enrich people's lives by creating and sharing abundance based on the pillars of love and integrity. We are committed to the Presidential Job Summit and have a multifaceted approach to job creation. Firstly, we commit to local procurement as follows: by purchasing 90% of packaging locally, and that we are going to ensure that at least 50% of all raw materials is sourced locally. Secondly, we are committed to transferring skills to future practitioners in the hair and beauty industry through our academy. Over the past 10 years, more than 5,000 people have received training to become entrepreneurs and practitioners. Thirdly, we are committed to export-led growth by advancing the reputation of South African manufactured goods. This is achieved through innovation, benchmarking against international standards. And they've left a quote that they've asked me to read out, and it's from former President Nelson Mandela. We can change the world and make it a better place. It is in your hands to make a difference. That was the last commitment, Honorable Program Director. And as I conclude, I'd like to mention the fact that outside of these commitments that you've heard today, there are more commitments, and this comes from our strategic partner, Business Leadership South Africa, who have managed to speak to some of their members, and those who have made localization commitments, either in the form of ramping up their local content levels in their production or ramping up local procurement. The companies include Mondi, Sasol, the SA Insurance Association, Anglo Gold Ashanti, Standard Bank, Clientele, Nando's, and the First Rand Group. We invite other companies represented here to join these companies in signing a localization pledge, which is based at our stand, which the President has also signed this morning when he did his walkabout. And as a company, our commitment to the process is that we will continue to work tirelessly to promote localization. It has been said that after the summit, a monitoring committee will be set up to follow up on the progress of the outcomes that will result from the summit. Therefore, Public South African will form its own internal monitoring and evaluation team that will report on the progress made by each of these companies in line with the commitments they've made today. And all of this information will be shared with the summit's own monitoring committee. In addition, at our annual Buy Local Summit event, which is going to be held on the 13th of March 2019, we commit to give an update on progress made from today until then. This will help give a sense as to who will be celebrated at the annual presidential dinner announced yesterday, where the President promised presidential meals to those in attendance. Our last appeal is to everyone, every single last South African consumer, to commit to buying local. Therefore, on the 15th of November, we'll be launching our seasonal Buy Local campaign, which we would like the Honorable President to champion. And the campaign is aimed at reminding each of us that buying local sustains and creates jobs. As my parting shot, Honorable Program Director, I request all of you in this summit to indulge me for a few seconds as we flight an advert which will serve as a rallying call to South Africans to buy local, and which will also underpin the campaign to be launched in November. Thank you.
We started with so much hope. We opened the doors and the light poured in. But then, slowly at first, things stopped working. And people had to leave. Maybe we were careless or indifferent. After all, we made all the decisions. We chose to buy imported goods instead of our own. We thought we'd lost it all. Our jobs, our businesses, our hope. But it doesn't have to be this way. By choosing to buy local, we buy back jobs and the future we were destined for.
We can't ignore that rallying call from our own Wakanda. So now that I've concluded the buy local side of my presentation, Program Director, please allow me to introduce a newly found strategic partner from the SA Council for Graduates Cooperative, who are going to talk to us about what they are going to pledge as a commitment to assist with skills development, because buying local procurement, localization, creation of jobs all requires skills development. And I think Thulani Chifuta really elaborated more on that yesterday. So to come and give us the last commitment for the day from our segment of the program is Mr. Tamsan Matubela, who's the CEO of the SA Council for Graduates Cooperative. Thank you. Red light.
Thank you, Program Director. His Excellency President Ramaphosa, thank you for owning up to the commitment made at SONA in February 2018. The South African Council for Graduates Cooperative is making the following, which is not just a pledge, but this is a firm commitment to creating students that are competent for the world of work, and to ensure that our graduates, Mr. President, are not only looking for jobs, but they are able to run their own viable and profitable cooperatives. Our small commitment goes to employment of 200 TVET learners and university graduates. These are with effect from the 1st of October, ending 1st February 2019. And this comes with a 30% commitment for absorption by the following companies that have already signed commitments with us. Lafarge, which has started the recruitment of 50 TVET learners in Northwest Province, in the town, small town, rural town of Lichtenberg. Umsunduzi Municipality, which has already absorbed Dr. Zweli Mkhize commitment for 87, which is based in KwaZulu-Natal. Rom Engineering, which is a civil engineering company with 23 graduates in civil engineering, as well as Metsimahulu Municipality in the Free State with 40 of these graduates. The following organizations nationally are also taking interns, and they will be starting as well at the period that was stated. And we're very, very happy with these, because it's not for the first time, Mr. President, that will be taking these graduates. That is the NHPRC, Department of Public Works, as well as LIMUSA. The following organizations Minister of Labour, with your graciousness to give us an opportunity to be able to make our commitment here, are actually funding these. To labour, to business, and to government, we don't bring these students and graduates without any funding. We actually bring them with stipends, and many of those are able, Mr. President, to top up on the stipends we bring them. Food bev SETA, theatre SETA, the construction SETA, as well as the FP&M SETA are fully behind us in ensuring that our young people are actually living what Madiba said, that education can change the world. We are happy to see that this small number, it shows that indeed education is not a waste. Mr. President, Lafarge has made a commitment to redirect a 36 million rand pallet manufacturing business from being outsourced to be run by youth cooperatives in the area of Northwest. We are requesting all companies that are here to work with us in placing graduates, because we don't only place them because of the stipend. We have a PXT assessment, which is a job fit assessment, that gives the supervisor a tool that helps them to monitor and manage the graduates. And also we require all companies that takes our graduates to actually have what we call skills transfer metrics. Are you actually transferring the skills to young people, as we are saying? We are, in closing, requesting that we all use a single database. The Department of Labour has a job seekers database. I request the NYDA and all the other organizations that are here, particularly BUSA, let us utilize a single database. In that way, we will avoid duplication and ensure that the database that is sitting at the Department of Labour is put to good use. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Proudly SA, for having discussion and convincing with, various companies to make commitments. Let us say, all of us, halala South Africa, halala. Halala South Africa, halala. Those who were asking what would be the difference about this job summit, I do believe that they have learned what the difference is, particularly based on the commitments and also based on the agreement that was signed yesterday by our social partners led by the President of the Republic of South Africa. Now, let me say to all of you colleagues, deputy ministers, our social partners, diplomatic corps, and I also want President to say, since the International Labour Organization Pretoria office is here, we know that in the middle of November, you will be attending the Global Commission on the Future of Work. And I'm told that already the Director General of the ILO was informed about the proceedings of this particular job summit. And the Director General has said he's looking forward on the final discussions by the commissions and commissioners on the Global Commission on the Future of Work. And I must also say to all of us here, in terms of that program, the President of the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency, Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa, as he's leading the Global Commission on the Future of Work, he will be tabling that particular report in the next International Labour Conference in 2019, of which the ILO will also be celebrating 100 years of its existence. And it also coincides with the celebration of 100 years of our first democratic president, Nelson Mandela, and Mama Albertina Sisulu. And he will be addressing that conference, firstly, as the chairperson of the commission, and secondly, as the President of the Republic of South Africa. And I must say, we must be proud as South Africans to have a leader who will be able to lead the discussions in the International Labour Conference next year. And now, President, allow me to thank all the honorable ministers and deputy ministers, our overall conveners of our social partners in their general membership, diplomatic corps, and also the media. And most importantly, to thank the officials that we're calling technical team to prepare for this job summit and to start the discussions at NEDLAC so that we can have a proper outcome of this particular summit. I'm using this opportunity to thank you because I'm now going to allow the President, who is the owner of this program, His Excellency Honorable Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, to come and respond to the commitments and also to indicate what will be the way forward after today and officially close this particular session. But I must also say, before he goes, he's going to go back to the stalls that he has not yet visited outside of the hall. And therefore, I will appeal that immediately when he finishes, the President and his entourage. Unfortunately, there were those now, I don't know why they didn't come back to take their seats. Mr. Pijan, before President azokhuluma, uzothatha isihlalo sakho, uThulani futhi, cela uzothatha isihlalo sakho, so that President mayisevala, because you are the ones who are going to make sure that your members are going to continue to participate in the discussions at NEDLAC, and you have also made commitments that you are going to monitor the implementation of the very same agreement. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa to come and make comments and officially close this session. Your Excellency, the President.